The Velvet Room is one of the more obtuse forms of Persona symbolism. Its form is simultaneously fluid and yet always considered, the interior of a subtle reflection on what is to come and why, shaped by the person's perspective and their journey and the forces that they are in conflict with. Yet at the same time, it is always coated with that enigmatic psychic indigo and raises questions both subtle and perhaps best left unanswered by all except the player. It is a location simultaneously of safety while invoking the surrealism of Twin Peaks, the dwelling of a demonic servant to a benevolent god, born of the mortal comprehension of what exists just beyond our understanding, a lawful safe haven to the endless chaos that bringeth Nyx, ascending Tartarus or descending into the abyss of time, a lawful prison where freedom is denied and taken over by a foreign god to subtly manipulate the trickster away from the path of liberation, or even just a benign limousine trudging along through the fog of the TV world. In each game, the Velvet Room has taken a different form, and in doing so informs a subtle and underrated aspect to the game's themes, leading of course to the question of what sort of form could the Velvet Room take in Persona 6. As a reminder, a game we know for sure will be green and thus probably coded towards the alignment of neutrality and balance versus the chaos and law of Persona 5 and Persona 3, and also likely to explore the themes of the natural world, sickness, health, and technology as some potential angles, while also seemingly having a heavier emphasis on the horror aspect of classic SMT. With these possibilities established, let us go over some ideas of what form the Velvet Room could manifest as in Persona 6. One element that I want to consider with these potential forms for the Velvet Room is the gameplay. At the end of the day, the Velvet Room's primary purpose is to fuse personas, and thus whatever form the Velvet Room should take should feel like it has the fusion happen as a core element to its presentation. And few places are as better to display that feature than in a laboratory, perhaps akin to the one that Dr. Victor has in the Devil Summoner games. Not only would that be a welcome callback to a series that is finally starting to gain some momentum with the recent Raito Remastered, but would also fit in thematically since green can also invoke feelings of advanced technology, especially given the recent shifts towards more green energy in most of the world that isn't America, with the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, hampering the global distribution of oil. While Dr. Victor is a pretty unlikely person to take over fusions, with the death of Igor's voice actor in Japan, it has been long speculated that Igor's position will be supplanted by a new character, most often speculated to be Jose, and as an avid fan of the trope, I'd love to see another mad scientist take center stage and fuse demons in his indigo velvet laboratory. My personal favorite form that the Velvet Room has taken so far has been the underwater base in Persona 5, the Phantom X. That opening shot of the protagonist looking left, right, and then above, only to view a massive whale swimming atop of him, is an immediately imposing and palpable scene, and as a general aesthetic, I think that a more open building with a window into the outside is a really cool idea, which could play into the game's themes. Given that with green as the confirmed main color of P6, and once again, green typically being the color of leaves, pine needles, moss, grass, algae, shrubbery, and so forth, there is probably going to be a thematic usage of the natural world, if not as the game's core theme, then at least in aesthetic, especially given the old leak alluding to P6 taking place in Inaba once again. As such, an observatory with an unobstructed view into the TV world beneath the fog feels like a natural pick. Not only would this be a thematic usage of the color green without intruding upon the iconic indigo of the room, but it would also serve as a nice callback to P4, even if the TV world does not return beyond this cameo in P6. Speaking of those old rumors, if Persona 6 does in fact return to Inaba, then I'd say that the game should be a spiritual successor to Persona 4 in at least a few key ways, given that the two games are seemingly being released in the same year, or at least close in proximity for Persona releases. It's not impossible that this is a scenario like Nocturne's HD release with its own spiritual successor in SMT5 earlier this decade. One way for Persona 6 to be a spiritual successor to Persona 4 would be to have the Velvet Room correspond to Persona 4's lasting legacy upon Inaba. Yellow was chosen for that game because it resembled the tape that police used to cordon off crime scenes, but the yellow was also used to thematically correspond to sickness and fear, the anxiety of one's shadow and that component of oneself becoming known and having the power over the person. As P6 will be green and perhaps correspond to health and the natural world, then a place of healing, albeit indigo rather than green, would fit the game on both a thematic level with the color and on a meta level as being a parallel to the previous game set in that location. Assuming again, of course, if the setting is indeed Inaba. It should be stated that these leaks are unconfirmed and quite old, but typically they come up in my comments section, so I will acknowledge them here and reference them as needed. Now, a place of healing could be many things. It could be a mystic spring in a cave or the closet of an abandoned building akin to the iconic ones of Nocturne, which later returned in for Apocalypse due to fan demand, or it could just be a plain old hospital room. But personally, I think that a long hallway-like room overlooking surgery would actually be best, with the surgery room being where fusion takes place, while the protagonist watches the attendees fuse in the room above. Speaking of Persona 4, the gimmick of the Velvet Room in that game was that it was a limousine. A moving vehicle seemingly aimlessly going about through the fog, and only pausing at a specific part of the story where the truth is almost lost. But a strong commitment to uncovering what really happened is what sets the story back on track. And thus the limousine moves forward once again, this time with a set and defined end goal of the truth, whatever that might be. It's a small detail that I really love. It gives the Velvet Room the impression that it is guiding us towards a desired destination, or that it is at least accompanying us to the goal akin to the elevator in Persona 3, but that it can only proceed if we, the player, have the strength and clarity of mind to see the whole picture in a particularly emotional period of the game's story. And I'd love to see that idea carry over in another vehicle Velvet Room, this time being a motorhome. A vehicle often used to camp out in the wilderness and thus fitting for a game with themes in the natural world and a balance of coexisting with it. Perhaps with its own twist on the formula by being stationary at first and only beginning to drive forward when the story has itself properly begun, or even parking as it were when we reach the desired destination, be that an important stop along the way like a dungeon while being in motion before these plot points, or else continuously moving until we reach the end of the journey like in Persona 3. And speaking as someone who once went on a family road trip in a motorhome back when I was a preteen, I can speak from experience when I say that a motorhome is big enough to accommodate the master of the Velvet Room, the assistant who will fuse our personas, and maybe someone extra could wind up doing another feature, maybe with the singer and the pianist who play that now iconic theme in the front seat, unseen and driving, once again like in P4's Limousine, but still entertaining the guests like the front seat typically does in road trips or long drives in my experience. One aspect of the color green that I haven't really discussed yet is that it is often the color for standing militaries, as green is natural camouflage for heavily forested areas. While I personally don't think that Persona will lean too heavily into the ideas of the army per se, as unless it's a popular anime, the military, or in Japanese case the JSDF, don't really play a big role in Japanese youth culture. However, the idea of a military bunker or base like Naoto's dungeon in P4 could be a form for the Velvet Room, as it would be a heavily protected place to represent safety, which could work thematically to serve as a safe haven in the story, or subverted akin to how the Velvet Room was corrupted into a prison in Persona 5. This could even be a Strange Journey reference, as the bunker's overall design could be based around the heavily armored military vehicles from Strange Journey. And I felt like that would be a fun reference, making the idea of a military bunker a worthy addition to this list on its own. The final potential motif for a Velvet Room form is something a bit more out there that I'm taking from online rumors from Persona 6 leaks, with Katsura Hashino himself chiming in and confirming that the recently leaked logo for P6 at least is legitimate, which would later be confirmed with the dropping of the teaser trailer during Summer Games Fest. Thus, I'd like to take a quick look at an earlier leak for P6 claiming that the cast will attend an art school, and recommend that the final potential form for the Velvet Room to take is an art gallery or studio, something akin to Madarame's palace and shack in Persona 5, albeit obviously much smaller. After some considering between going back and forth between these two options, I'd have to say that an art studio would be more logical. Fusing personas could be the implementation of the art, akin to how personas are executed to be fused in Persona 5, a sketchbook could work as the compendium, and as Persona has always loved to include demons as figmas and statues as is, some more being on display on the shelves as inspiration akin to a real art studio feels like something that would just work for this idea. This video should not have taken this long to make, but it's finally completed and uploaded, and I'm having difficulty putting into words the sheer satisfaction that I feel after all of the delays that it had to go through. Anyway, back to the present. Persona 6 had its reveal trailer about a week ago, and I have some thoughts that I'd like to say about it, as well as at least one more 6 potential for Persona 6 video, and I'm hoping to have these videos out within the next few weeks. If that sounds interesting, then there is an entire playlist on potential particulars for Persona 6 from all the way back during the 25th anniversary, and include potential clubs, mascots, and personas, amongst others. All on screen now. I've worked very hard on these and feel like they haven't gotten the views that I feel correspond to the effort that went into making them solo, so I'd appreciate any new viewer perhaps giving them a chance now that Persona 6 is relevant thanks to this reveal. And also subscribe for my upcoming videos for next week. Until next time, I am Balaukun, and I hope you all have a great week.